In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about some brand new speakers. Literally brand new. They was only released the week that I'm shooting this review video, but of course, I've had a set here for a while. And those speakers are the Revival Audio Atalante 4 that you can see sat there behind my left shoulder. And this is the second set of speakers that I've looked at from the French manufacturer Revival Audio. Last year, I reviewed the Atalante 5, and I thought they were super cool speakers with a big 12-inch bass, a big 3-inch soft dome mid-range driver, and a very cool look. So when I received the Atalante 4, I will admit I was a little disappointed that they were not the same kind of design. And I was also a little disappointed to not see some kind of soft dome mid-range driver, because for some reason I always seem to like a soft dome mid-range driver and I have absolutely no idea why, so it's really quite silly of me, but again, I'm just being honest. But I think it's important that we consider the price difference between the speakers, with the Atalante 4 costing £3,890 and the Atalante 5 cost just shy of £5,000 by the time you add their stand. So there really is quite a big price difference between the two models in the Atalante range. And that means that the 4 price-wise are much closer to my own Mission 770 speakers. And I quickly realised that the Atalante 4, I am sure, are quite deliberately different to the 5, because not everyone wants that big, wide, big speaker up on a stand in their home. Some audiophiles prefer a more traditional floor stander or tower speaker, and I totally get it, because aesthetically tower speakers, they just have a certain look about them, especially bigger or taller tower speakers, and the Atalante 4 are pretty tall and quite substantial. If you look at them next to the also tall, but I think deliberately slender looking KEF R11 Meta, the Atalante are almost as tall, but they are clearly more stocky looking. And I think the aesthetics are going to be the first thing someone decides on with speakers this size, because you can't easily hide them. And the Atalante 4's design is hard to categorise. It seems a real blend of traditional, contemporary and classic to some degree. And it's intended to be a Japanese-French fusion look, which I definitely get, but with the Atalante 4, it feels more traditional to me than maybe some kind of fusion. The finish is walnut, but there is a bit of red colour to it rather than it being just brown, and I do like it. It grows on you. I also like the extra touches of detail, what I'm going to call the trims. The trim around the baffle and on the sides, and also the laser etched logos. They all just add a little bit of extra character. The finish is also matte, so when you put your hands on the speakers, they feel more like real wood. And that is definitely different to painted, gloss finished MDF cabinets that definitely feel very mass manufactured and less special in some ways. And does any of that really matter? Probably not. You're unlikely to be hands-on with your speakers, too often, but I think these are just the points of distinction. Revival design and build all of their speakers in France, which is likely another distinction from some of their competitors. While we are talking about the cabinets, these are pretty heavy speakers at 38 kilograms, but that weight doesn't seem to come from a very, I'm going to use the word dense cabinet, because if you do the tap test on them, especially lower down, they sound quite hollow in their construction, which I found really quite interesting. However, as you go higher up the speaker, the sound seems to, deaden. The thud seems to deaden like the cabinet is getting denser up the top. So that's really interesting to me, because it makes me think that the weight that we're talking about here is, in large part, coming from the drivers and the magnets and the assemblies, which of course is very interesting. And on the website, you can see that it's definitely the case with the tweeter magnet, which is absolutely enormous in relation to the 28mm tweeter driver size. And that's partly because it's using a ferrite magnet system. Revival do have a patented what they call Arid Plus technology to better control and absorb the rear sound wave of the tweeter to help get more extension, lower the resonant frequency to achieve more detail from a soft dome tweeter. And if you like the less splashy, less zingy type of treble delivery from a soft dome tweeter, but can find that soft dome tweeters can be a little bit too soft sounding or a little bit too rolled off sounding, well then straight away, these are speakers that will appeal to you, because they definitely do not do that. For bass, the Atalante 4 used dual 7-inch BSC or basalt sandwich construction woofers that I think look like a cross between an old school Kevlar driver from Bowers and a carbon fiber driver from Acoustic Energy. And they probably sound like that combination too. There is a nice balance of bass authority, driver nimbleness going on that you generally get from carbon fiber drivers, but with a little bit of extra weightiness and bounciness to the bass that I particularly like. But there is maybe not the same kind of impactfulness of bass, the punchy bass that we can get from different types of bass or, woofers and drivers. But I'm being very, very general here, just trying to give you a little bit of extra insight. Then probably the most important driver to talk about will be the 5-inch mid-range driver that is also BSC, basalt sandwich construction. And the reason why this is the most important is because it has to make me like it as much as the 3-inch soft dome that was on the Atalante 5, and that is not an easy task, let me tell you. But interestingly, I found the vocal quality, the dynamics, the clarity of the vocals and the speed of the vocal delivery to be one of the biggest strengths of the Atalante 4. So that's really very interesting. But there is a little but here that I will definitely get to. The crossover, Revival say, is tuned by ear, which is very interesting, and it's using the least amount of parts as possible, which is also interesting and maybe a little telling too for how the speakers sound. And I also need to mention the spikes and leveling system because they are pretty substantial and definitely different. At first, when you install them, they seem a little odd, but in practice, they make leveling the speakers a cinch. It's a very well thought out design, but they do look a little unusual and definitely not understated. And before we talk about sound quality, I think it's very important to talk about amplifiers because this will be very important to you, of course, if you're considering purchasing these speakers. Now, I think through my testing that you will want an amplifier with the Atalante 4 that has a good amount of current drive or drive capability. Not necessarily loads and loads of watts, but good drive capability. There's a difference there. And I also think you will likely want an amplifier that has a slightly warmer character and maybe a more laid back character. That is what I think would balance best with them based on the testing that I did between 3 different very good but very different amplifiers. I started with the Griffin Essence stereo power amplifier, which is 110 watts into the Atalante's 4 ohms. And it's a monster of an amplifier, but I prefer to use it in Class AB mode where it sounds a little softer and warmer compared to using it in pure Class A mode, which is more dynamic and crisp, energetic sounding. I also tested the NAD M23, which is a Purifier Class D amplifier, and it did not sound good at all, despite having 380 watts into 4 ohms. And I don't know what happened here or why, but the M23 sounded really lacking, very thin and edgy, and just not good at all, and that was a real surprise to me, but it's really important to be honest. Lastly, I tried the Galleon TS A75, which I much preferred to the NAD because its sound is bolder and warmer, and overall it was just a much better fit for the Atalante 4. But again, being honest, it could not produce anything like the sound that I was getting from the much bigger Griffin power amplifier, which is to be expected given the huge price difference. And this was all interesting to me because on paper, the Atalante 4 seemed like relatively easy speakers to drive with an 89 decibel sensitivity going into, a 4 ohm load, minimum of 3.2 impedance load. So that all seems fine. Maybe it's the very simple crossover where you can really hear the differences between the amplifiers. I would say this is nothing necessarily to be worried about, just something to be mindful of if you go and have a demo of these speakers. Try different amplifiers because you will really hear a difference, and that might dictate or might influence your impressions of these speakers. So let's talk sound quality and what stood out to me and what did I like and dislike most about the Atalante 4. Starting at the top, I mentioned that the treble was extended, and I'm going to use the words lively and present for a soft dome. What I liked was the subtlety of the treble information. Yes, the highs are extended, but they're still softer, more rounded, rather than zingy or splashy. So they have more information to them rather than more impact about them. And these are quite tall speakers, and I think that definitely helps. But I know it's the higher frequencies, the information that lives in our high frequencies, which is really important for a tall sound or a large scale sound, or just a sound that has, this kind of ambience, the sound that kind of comes out into the room and creates like a 3D ambience within the right music. And if that is important to you, and it is important to me more so these days than ever before, well then that's the Atalante 4 delivered all of that, all the different music that I was listening to. I never felt shortchanged in any way in terms of ambience, and the height and size and scale of the sound. And I was impressed because this was all delivered with great detail, but with a nice mixture of subtlety and energy. But I did find that the overall treble energy could be slightly too hot for my taste, especially at the loud volumes that I generally listen at. But this was fine because I was able to find the balance that I liked by changing the Chord Hugo TT2's DAC filter mode to mode 4, which slightly softens off the treble just a little bit. And for clarification, I would normally use filter mode 3 with my own Mission 770 speakers because they have that softer soft dome treble delivery, so having more treble presence energy coming through the system is an advantage with them. But really that is what those filter modes are there for. They're really very beneficial and useful, so yeah, being able to make that slight adjustment to find the balance, I was quite happy with. Moving down to the mid-range and vocals, I was really surprised for the betterment in terms of how well resolved and detailed vocals were. They could be very fast and attacking with some Queen Amiga reggae that I've been listening to a lot lately, or sultry and deep and characterful with some Cold to Wall, which is another favourite of mine. The Griffin pre-power was really able to bring out the vocals' fullness and depth that's locked away in the recording in a very special way, and the Atalante 4 were able to show me this, which was really very impressive. And they were also able to show me, again with the Griffin pre and power, a really nice, what I would class as like an up close to a microphone vocal detail and immediacy, like this upfront energy immediacy. You can imagine a singer singing into a vocal. That's a very a very close thing if you put your mouth near a microphone. They was able to capture that or present that, but at the same time give me a nice see through the speakers onto that vocal happening in what audiophiles call holographic, like floating in through air. That a nice mixture of the two, but also do it with a really nice scale of sound. It's a larger speaker, they give you a really large scale. And the Mission 770 speakers that I obviously listen to a lot, they can do a lot of that as well, but they can't quite do it with the same scale. I think again, the size of the speaker really dictates that kind of difference there. But to contrast that difference, I did notice that where there is very obvious sibilance in music, I found that the Atalante 4 was resolving that maybe just a little too well for me. Now, they wasn't creating like this harsh, distorted sound that sometimes some speakers can create with that really difficult, it's a difficult sound to record. It's a really I'm really sensitive to it, that sound. But the Atalante 4 were just resolving it very clearly for me, making it quite obviously present that I could hear it, whereas the Mission 770, they do a better job at disguising that. Now I need to clarify that making the filter change in the DAC mode and actually setting the speakers up to have a bit more toe out than I normally would in this listening room helped to create a nicer balance through that kind of what I think is called the presence region of the treble. But this is something that definitely stood out to me, and again it's a point of distinction and difference. The bass from the Atalante 4 definitely impressed me for its energy, mixed with its subtlety, mixed with its smoothness. There was a very good amount of bass, very room-filling, with good bass extension providing a great foundation to the music. And I just liked the ebb and flow of the bass, which was smooth and rounded and pleasing. And I think that is how the Atalante 4 have been tuned, to give very smooth bass transitions from higher to deeper notes, which I definitely like, but other speakers I find can have a bit more of a raised, maybe mid-bass region, which can make the sound have a bit more punchy impact, but it can also make the middle of the soundstage a little thicker, a little more congested. So it's kind of like, which do you prefer? The Atalante 4 never congest that central region. They always want to leave kind of like this open sound in the middle. So the bass isn't quite as dynamic, punchy in that mid-bass region from them, but it's very smooth and very detailed. And interestingly, listening to Christine and the Queens, the track St. Claude, it's got these really interesting bass samples that go boom, 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 all the way out the room from the speakers out to you. And the way that the Atalante 4 was delivering those lots of samples, big scale, from the speakers kind of dancing out towards me, sitting at the listening position with real clarity, each individual sample, perfectly symmetrical, both sides, dung, 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 all the way out to me was, it's very impressive stuff. However, this is also due to the Griffin power amplifier really driving them well. And again, for a difference to my Mission 770, in the same system, the Mission's bass doesn't have quite the same scale or quite the same size of impact, but I did find that the Mission's bass has more of that mid-bass punch that I mentioned just before. And that's definitely better in some of the music that I listen to, like the Queen Amiga Reggae, but it's definitely not as good listening to Christine and the Queens. And lastly, to talk about, I think, is soundstage. And I was definitely more impressed here than I thought I was going to be after I did the tap test on the speakers, because that slightly hollow sound made me assume that these would be kind of bloomed sounding speakers to make them sound larger. And they definitely do sound large. I've mentioned their scale of delivery multiple times because that is really important. So yes, they created a very big sound. And what I liked was that when you're listening to a sound field or a sound stage, that the elements of that sound stage, whether it's an instrument player or just a sample, those were all large and they all felt really big and large, which I definitely liked. A big bold sound is what I like. But at the same time, I appreciated the three-dimensionality of the sound stage. Sounds that can come out into the room, sounds that go left and right, and sounds that go well beyond the speakers, which is helped by the fact that I can have the speakers very far away from that front wall. So overall, that three-dimensional sound field and delivery was very impressive, because there was never once was there sound that was what I'd class as tied to the box. And sometimes with a speaker that is blooming its sound, you'll just hear parts of the sound be like tied to the box, and it breaks that illusion of you just listening to sound in a sound field and not to speakers. As soon as you hear sound kind of tied to a box or attached to a box, at least for me, it kind of breaks that illusion. So I definitely didn't hear that not once. And I've listened to these speakers a lot, many hours, very loud across a whole variety of music. But while I'm on that, I also listened at lower volumes too, and thought that the Atalante 4 sounded good at low volumes, and I think best at not crazy loud volumes. So from low to pretty loud was best. They could lose some composure if you were too greedy with the volume, like I always am at times. Again, this is where a warmer sounding setup or amplifier or just system will balance them best if you want to get them into a party mode. And to complete my comparison really to my own Mission 770 speakers, it's a really interesting one, because the Atalante 4 are totally different, of course, totally different design, and they can definitely give you more at the music's extremes. There's more going on in the treble and there's more going on in the deeper bass. Again, it's a bigger speaker. We would kind of expect that, but it's that kind of middle region, the bit that we hear most of, which of course is the most important difference. And it's a really difficult one because I feel like the Atalante 4 can give you more detail. It's like got more upfront energetic sound that can give more detail coming through, but at the same time I feel like they are more fussy. The Missions are just easy speakers to sit and enjoy it and listen to, and listening to the Missions off of this big Griffin system that I have here behind me, I've never heard them sound as good. The liveliness, the energetic, the big bass delivery that they can deliver. So these are two really good speakers, and I think it will just purely depend on what do you like the most. Maybe how much do you value extra bass and treble energy. Maybe you do, especially in a larger room, but in a smaller room like this, both of these speakers can give you fantastic, really enjoyable sound. So it'll probably just boil down to, which one do you prefer, the style of, and maybe the look of. And I was hoping to give you a comparison with the KEF R11 Meta, because they are more similar-ish in style of speaker, but the KEF were delayed in getting to me and they are brand new. So they are going to need at least a week before I can critically listen to them, and the show must go on. So if you're interested to know how the Revival might compare to the KEF, subscribe to the channel, because I'm sure I'll talk about it in my R11 review that will be coming soon. To summarise this review then, this has been an interesting one because the Atalante 4 do and don't sound like how they look. You know, they look like a contemporary speaker, the type of speaker that will have quite a relaxed, soft, easygoing sound, I think, by the finish and just the style, but that's really not how they are. Maybe they are a little bit in the bass, the way the bass is tuned, but in the mid-range and the treble, these are very much, very much a modern sounding speaker. So that is where we'll need to think about our system synergy and our system balance. I actually think these will be great speakers to throw some tubes at, some of that lovely tube romantic loveliness that we can get from really nice sounding tubes. I think these would be great speakers to throw that at. Sadly, I didn't have anything here to test, but yeah, they gave me that kind of vibe. But really, I think it boils down to the looks. If you like the look of this speaker, if you think they'll look really nice in your home, well, then I'm confident you could put a system together that doesn't have to cost as much as the big Griffin back there. Of course, if you can use a Griffin like that, you won't regret it, but it doesn't have to cost that kind of level, and you'll still be able to achieve really fantastic sound at home, which is really what it's all about. So I hope this review has helped you. I hope you've enjoyed it, found it useful. If you did, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel if you appreciate and enjoy my take on hi-fi reviewing.